Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome, dear class. I hope all of you are well, all you are healthy. So we'll continue our discussion on complications of peritonitis and their management. As you all know, last time we discussed in detail the different aspects of peritonitis, causes of peritonitis, their diagnosis, differential diagnosis, management, and particular emphasis on the resuscitation of the patient with acute peritonitis. So today we'll talk about the complications of acute peritonitis. So dear class, the complication of peritonitis are actually divided into two groups: systemic complication and abdominal complications. So look at this picture. So this is one of the complications of peritonitis leading to adhesive bowel obstruction, multiple adhesions. So patients, peritonitis signs and symptoms. So just a repetition: abdominal pain is the main symptom, loss of appetite, vomiting, absolute constipation, and sometimes diarrhea. And nausea, vomiting, high temperature. So I briefly revised what are the clinical feature of peritonitis, what we talked last time. Acute peritonitis, there is abdominal pain, distension, absolute constipation, vomiting, fever, and systemic upset because of the toxemia of peritonitis. Examination. Abdominal examination reveals the tenderness, rebound tenderness, rigidity, guarding, shifting dullness, and absent gut sounds. Complications of peritonitis are divided into systemic complications and abdominal complications. First, we'll talk about the systemic complications. As we all know, peritoneal surface consists of cuboidal absorptive epithelium, the huge surface area equivalent to the skin lining of one's individual. So that's why soon there's a perforation of hollow viscus or the trauma, there's peritonitis. All these toxins are absorbed rapidly into the systemic circulation and lead to bacteremia, endotoxemia, shock, septic shock-like syndrome, and multiple organs may be involved. So that's why the prototype exemplary condition of sepsis is given in the peritonitis. Bacteremia is presence of microorganism in the bloodstream. Endotoxemia, when the toxins are present in the bloodstream. Septicemia is once the microorganism they are multiplying within the bloodstream. So most of the time these the endotoxic shock or endotoxemia leads to the peripheral vasodilatation, and the shock is multifactorial in this condition. There's loss of gut dilatation, third spirit fluid loss, dehydration because of the there's not taking anything, there's lot of Ng aspirate, vomiting, and hypercatabolic states all add up to the hypovolemia. So there's a so this condition will there is release of toxins, and there's the cascades of event starting with the mediators of inflammation, what you call. Once these mediators of inflammation they are not under check, we call it SIRS syndrome, systemic inflammatory response syndrome. And once this going to happen, this lead to extensive vasodilatation, and initially there's a warm phase of shock and then the cold phase of shock. So these surges lead to modes. Modes are basically multi-organ involvement. Which organ are involved? Mostly the respiratory system, leading there may be bronchopneumonia, atelectasis, respiratory failure in the form of ARDS. There may be hyperperfusion of the kidney, and additional sepsis may lead to acute renal shutdown. There may be bone marrow suppression. There may be involvement of the clotting system. They may be involved, leading to DIC. There may be cardiac myocardial depression because of the suppressive effect of the toxins. So all will add up and leading to the multi-organ failure, or what we call MODS, multi-organ dysfunction syndrome. So when you talk about the abdominal complications, there are multiple adhesions leading to adhesive small bowel obstructions. There may be, once there's intra-abdominal collections leading to prolonged, the temporary paralytic ileus is always there, but once there's a prolonged paralytic ileus, that's a bad prognostic sign. And then there's a residual or recurrent intra-abdominal collections. It's very important. Residual or recurrent intra-abdominal collections, they are dangerous complications. And the portal pyemia, once the portal venous system is invaded by the organisms, and there's a infection leading to liver abscess. So portal pyemia is one of the sequelae of acute abdomen, or what we call peritonitis. Acute intestinal obstruction due to peritoneal adhesions. As we all know, one of the important and the common causes of intestinal obstruction is adhesive bowel obstruction. So leading to central colicky abdominal pain. There may be bilious vomiting, and there may be constipation. Most of the time, these adhesions present with subacute obstruction, but can present with acute intestinal obstruction, and there may be absolute constipation, colicky abdominal pain, bilious vomiting, abdominal distension. On X-ray, bowel gases can be seen, and multiple airflow level, and you can see the volvulae conniventes, and the peristalsis activity on examination. There's a hyperactive gut sounds, more common with localized peritonitis, and it's essential to distinguish paralytic ileus from the mechanical obstruction. In paralytic ileus, there's no gut activity. Generally, there's no pain and colicky pain, and there's no gut sounds are absent, and in mechanical obstruction, the gut sounds are exaggerated. Paralytic ileus is the peristalsis reduced to completely absent because of the sepsis in the peritoneal cavity, and there's very little pain or no pain. Gas-filled groove may be seen all over and throughout the small and the large intestine on X-rays. So they can be picked, and this is a difference between this is adynamic obstruction. So this is very important slide, dear students. Abscesses are intraperitoneal collections. So these are the shaded are the common sites of intraperitoneal collections. So first you can see the subphrenic collections. Number 2, paracolic gutters. Number 3, right iliac fossa. As you know, most common cause of peritonitis is perforation of appendix or perforation of duodenum. In both cases, right iliac fossa, right paracolic gutter, and ultimately the pelvis is the most common site of collection because it's the most dependent part. So you can have collection anywhere, but the common sites are subphrenic, paracolic gutters, right iliac fossa, pelvis, and interloop collections. Multiple interloop collections. Signs and symptoms: vague and consistent of nothing more than a lassitude, anorexia, failure to thrive, and patient is unwell actually. Fever is there may be tachycardia, there may be leukocytosis, and there may be localized abdominal sign when the collection is in the right iliac fossa, paracolic gutter. But once the collection is in the subphrenic spaces or in the pelvis, is the most common site, you may not find tenderness on abdominal examination because it is deep in the pelvis. The only diagnostic point will be the digital rectal examination, in which you can feel the tenderness and bogginess in the rectal wall. the palpable mass may develop when the palpable mass in the intraperitoneal abscess should be monitored by making out its limitations on the abdominal wall, and meticulous daily examination is important. Monitoring with repeated ultrasound, CT scan, and majority of the cases antibiotic treatment will help to localize the abscesses. In other, the abscess fails to resolve and become larger, these cases must be drained. The basic principle of the surgery is whenever there is the collection of pus must be drained. In many cases, by waiting for a few days, the abscess becomes adherent to the abdominal wall so that it can be drained without opening the generalized abdominal cavity. This is very important statement. This is a law of nature. The nature helps to limit the infection to the peripheries. So collection settle on the peripheries and makes their wall with the anterior abdominal wall. So here is the basic surgical principle: drain intraperitoneal collection extraperitoneally. So don't open the peritoneal cavity, just open the collection by the shortest possible route, so that the generalized nature has made the arrangement to limit this infection from the generalized peritoneal cavity. Now the surgeon should not break those adhesions and again disseminate the infection to the peritoneal cavity. So it's called extraperitoneal drainage of intraperitoneal abscess. If the facilities are available, CT guided or ultrasound guided biopsy can be drainage should be preferred to avoid operation, but ultimate court of appeal is drainage. So open drainage of intraperitoneal collection should be carried out by the cautious blunt finger to minimize the risk of intersinus fistula and intraperitoneal dissemination. So particular emphasis on the pelvic abscess is common because of the dependent site, and significant collection may be there because without any local clinical signs. So the common factor will be once the patient is recovering from peritonitis, develop diarrhea with mucus and having pyrexia, one should suspect pelvic abscess. So commonest site of intraperitoneal collection, and it can occur as sequela of any case of diffuse peritonitis because it's the most dependent space. Pus can accumulate in this area without serious constitutional disturbance unless the patient is examined carefully from day to day, and such abscess may attain considerable proportions before diagnosed because of the location in the pelvis. Characteristic and symptom: diarrhea with mucus. Then rectal examination reveals bulging of anterior wall, bogginess, and there is a tenderness also. If left untreated, these cases burst into the rectum, after which the patient nearly always recover rapidly. If such does not happen, deliberately drain this rectal drainage of intraperitoneal abscess. If someone asks you what is the treatment of pelvic abscess, the per rectal drainage of the pelvis abscess. In the woman, it can be drained into the vagina. It's more easy. In other cases, when the abscess is definitely pointing to the rectum, rectal drainage is done. If diagnosis is not confirmed, ultrasound, CT scan or needed through the rectum, the abdominal wall into the swelling to confirm. Laparotomy is almost never needed. Rectal drainage is preferable to the supraabdominal drainage because it will avoid contamination to the generalized peritoneal cavity. Drainage tube can be inserted through the rectum or the vagina under radiological guidance. That's all. This picture, how you break the adhesions, opening the pelvic abscess into the rectum through the anterior rectal wall, and you can put a sinus forceps to enlarge this opening, and this will heal spontaneously. Drainage of pelvic abscess, eventual condition. Then you can put a tube there and keep this drain for a while. A pelvic abscess seen on CT scan. So these are the few slides already talked So different partitions of the peritoneal cavity, supracochlear compartment, infracochlear compartment, pelvis, subphrenic spaces shown in the other picture as well. So this is the anatomy of subphrenic spaces. The 4 subphrenic spaces: right subphrenic, right subhepatic, left subphrenic, and subhepatic spaces. You can see a better location here. Left superior abscess or left subphrenic, number 2 labeled as left inferior abscess, mean lesser sac. Number 3 right superior, mean subphrenic space, and 4th right inferior, mean right subhepatic space. So we have 4 spaces here, very important surgically for these collections: right subphrenic, left subphrenic, right subhepatic, and lesser sac. So another view: subhepatic, lesser sac, subdiaphragmatics, right and left. Another view: intraperitoneal spaces where the collection may be there. So subphrenic abscess on simple X-ray in the left picture, you can see this is highly different from the, should not be confused with the free gas under the right dome of diaphragm and peritonitis. But this is, you can see the air fluid level, a straight line. This is not crescenteric shadow, this is straight line. This is air fluid level. It means there's an abscess in the subphrenic space. Arrow shows. So that is how the subphrenic space can be. There is a CT scan in the left side showing the subphrenic abscess. So subphrenic abscess must be drained extraperitoneally. It can be drained under image guide, or so all these abscesses must be covered with IV intravenous antibiotics, and monitoring is very important. Thank you very much, dear students. So we have discussed the different complications of peritonitis with particular emphasis on the pelvic abscess and subphrenic abscesses. They are very important for your examination point of view. There's sometimes question from the written paper, and it's very important, particularly the pelvic abscess and subphrenic abscess. So once you will be over with the lecture, you will be given the assignment regarding this lecture around 10:30 a.m. I hope you are doing well. You will next time we'll be talking about the tuberculous abdomen or abdominal tuberculosis. Thank you very much for your listening. Thank you very much for your concentration. Thank you.